Ryan Thompson had always enjoyed his peaceful corner of the neighborhood. It was the kind of place where people mostly kept to themselves, save for the occasional wave across driveways or a polite nod at the mailbox. That was exactly why he had chosen it. After years of apartment living surrounded by thin walls and noisy neighbors, he had finally managed to buy his own house, a place where he could relax, unwind, and enjoy the fruits of his labor without interference. The best part? His property sat just outside the jurisdiction of the dreaded homeowners association that controlled most of the surrounding neighborhood. The first thing Ryan had done after moving in was renovate the backyard. He had spent months planning, saving, and finally executing his vision. A sleek in-ground pool, a spacious deck with built-in lighting, and a privacy fence to keep things secluded. This was his sanctuary, his escape from the chaos of the world. With his remote work as a self-employed contractor, he had the flexibility to take a dip in the middle of the day, lounge with a book in the evening, or host quiet gatherings with a few close friends. Life was good, until Karen Davis showed up. Karen was the self-appointed queen of the neighborhood's HOA. Short, stocky, and eternally scowling, she carried herself with the kind of self-importance usually reserved for dictators and movie villains. She wore her HOA-branded polo shirt like a military uniform and patrolled the streets as though she was on border control duty. Every lawn, every fence, every mailbox was subject to her scrutiny, and if she spotted something out of line, a letter would promptly arrive in the mailbox, complete with an arbitrary fine. Ryan had heard stories about her before, but since his property wasn't part of the HOA, he had never expected to be on her radar. That changed the day he caught her standing at the end of his driveway, clipboard in hand, staring into his backyard like a vulture sizing up a meal. "Good afternoon," she called out, her voice dripping with fake cheerfulness, as Ryan stepped onto his deck. Ryan took a sip of his coffee, sighing. He could already tell this wasn't going to be a friendly chat. "Afternoon," he replied cautiously. "I was just admiring your beautiful pool," Karen continued, stepping closer. "It's really quite a lovely addition to the community." Ryan frowned, setting his coffee down on the deck railing. "Appreciate that, but it's not part of the community. It's my backyard." Karen's smile didn't falter, but there was something sharp in her gaze. "Oh, but you see, Mr. Thompson, your property is visible from the street. That means it impacts the aesthetic of the neighborhood, which falls under the HOA's jurisdiction." Ryan blinked. "Come again." Karen cleared her throat, flipping through her clipboard as though reading from an official document. "Any amenities that are clearly visible to neighbors or passers-by may be subject to community regulation and fair use policy. Since your pool is within sight of other homes, we've decided it should be classified as community property." For a moment, Ryan just stared at her, waiting for the punchline. Surely she was joking. No one could possibly be this delusional. But Karen's smug expression remained unchanged, and the way she stood, arms folded, chest puffed out, told him she genuinely believed the nonsense she was spewing. "That's not how property ownership works," Ryan finally said. "My name is on the deed. I paid for the land, the pool, the maintenance. This isn't community property. It's mine." Karen's expression darkened slightly, but she maintained her practiced customer service smile. "Oh, I understand your confusion," she said, her tone patronizing. "Many homeowners feel that way at first, but the HOA bylaws clearly state that anything enhancing neighborhood value must be accessible to all residents. And since your property is adjacent to an HOA-controlled street," Ryan cut her off with a chuckle, shaking his head. "I'm not in the HOA. Never signed up. Never agreed to any of this." Karen's eye twitched. "That's, well, an oversight, I'm sure. But regardless, you benefit from living near our community. The HOA has worked hard to maintain high property values in this neighborhood. It's only fair that you contribute back." Ryan ran a hand down his face. "Are you seriously telling me that because you like how my pool looks, you think you have the right to use it?" Karen nodded as though this was the most obvious thing in the world. "It's only fair. You wouldn't want to be seen as selfish, would you?" Ryan exhaled slowly, fighting the urge to laugh in sheer disbelief. "You can't be serious." Karen's smile vanished. Her posture stiffened, her fingers tightening around her clipboard. "If you refuse to cooperate, I will have no choice but to escalate this matter to the board." "Do what you got to do," Ryan replied, waving her off as he turned to walk back inside. "Consider this your first violation notice." Karen called after him, shaking a piece of paper in his direction. "I expect your compliance within the week." Ryan didn't even dignify that with a response. He simply shut the sliding door behind him, shaking his head. Surely she wouldn't take this any further, right? The next morning, a letter that looked official from the HOA arrived in Ryan's mailbox. He didn't even have to open it to guess what it said. This woman is insane. Instead of wasting his time with whatever nonsense she had written, Ryan went about his day, enjoying his morning swim and ignoring Karen's glaring presence from across the street. But the next time he checked his mailbox, there was another notice, and then another, each one more ridiculous than the last. Your pool must be made accessible to all community members on weekends. Lifeguards will be assigned at your expense. Failure to comply will result in fines and further action. Ryan chuckled as he read them, shaking his head. She really thought she had power over him. Then came the flyers, printed, laminated, and distributed to every house in the neighborhood. Exciting news. The community now has a new pool for all residents. Thanks to your wonderful HOA. Ryan nearly dropped his coffee. She did not just advertise his pool as public property. And sure enough, that weekend, chaos ensued. A crowd of neighbors, complete with beach towels, pool floats, and sunscreen, arrived at Ryan's front gate like it was a community event. Kids bounced excitedly, parents chatted, and someone even set up a snack table. They all looked so convinced that this was normal that Ryan almost felt bad when he shut the gate in their faces. "What are you doing?" one woman asked, confused. "Isn't today pool day?" "No, it's not," Ryan said firmly. "This is my private property." "But the HOA said." Ryan sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "I don't care what the HOA said. They have zero authority over my property." The chatter turned to murmurs of confusion and frustration, with some people genuinely upset that they weren't getting their promised free pool day. Then Karen arrived, and she was furious. "What the hell do you think you're doing, Ryan?" she barked, marching up to the gate. "You're embarrassing yourself." Ryan crossed his arms. "You told people my pool was public. That's fraud." Karen scoffed. "Don't be dramatic. This is for the good of the community." Ryan took a deep breath. Then, for the first time, he pulled out his phone and started recording. "Say that again, Karen. Tell me exactly why you think my private property belongs to the HOA." Karen's face twisted in fury, her voice rising. "If you refuse to cooperate, I'll be forced to take legal action." Ryan smirked. "You do that." And with that, he shut the gate in her face. What he didn't know was that this was only the beginning. Ryan thought the situation had reached peak absurdity. He had figured that after shutting down Karen's ridiculous claim and recording her nonsense for proof, she would back off, embarrassed at being caught in her own delusion. But that was wishful thinking. If anything, Karen seemed even more determined to make his life miserable. The first sign that things were escalating came early the next morning. Ryan woke up to find a bright red notice taped to his front door. He peeled it off, reading the bold, capitalized letters. Notice of noncompliance. "Dear homeowner, your property has been found in violation of community policies regarding shared amenities. Failure to provide proper access to the community pool. Unauthorized installation of security gates restricting public entry. Violation of HOA-approved recreational property guidelines. Fines will begin accumulating at $100 per day until compliance is achieved." Ryan read it twice just to make sure he wasn't imagining things. Fines? Compliance? What was this nonsense? He wasn't in the HOA. The sheer audacity of Karen's attempt at bullying him into submission nearly made him laugh. Instead, he grabbed his phone and dialed the number listed on the notice. It rang 3 times before an overly cheerful yet artificial-sounding voice answered. "Hello, you've reached the Springdale Neighborhood HOA office. This is Karen Davis. How can I assist you?" Ryan couldn't stop the smirk that crept onto his face. "Hey, Karen, just got your fun little notice on my door. Got a question. How exactly do you plan to find someone who isn't in your HOA?" There was a brief silence, followed by the sound of Karen clearing her throat. "Well, technically, Mr. Thompson, you reside within an HOA-regulated area, which means you are still required to uphold the standards we set forth." Ryan shook his head. "Yes, see, that's where you're wrong. My house is outside your HOA's boundaries. I checked before I moved in. I never signed any agreement. You have zero authority over me." Karen let out a condescending chuckle, as if he were a child struggling to understand something simple. "You may not have signed the official agreement, but that doesn't change the fact that your home is a visible part of the community. We have the right to enforce standards that benefit everyone." Ryan exhaled sharply, trying to contain his irritation. "Okay, Karen, Let's say for a second I actually cared about your imaginary rules. Why the hell would my private pool be considered community property? Oh, Ryan, she sighed, her tone syrupy sweet. You have to see the bigger picture. The HOA is all about sharing resources. If everyone were selfish with their luxuries, what kind of community would we be fostering? By keeping your pool private, you're excluding your neighbors from something that could benefit them all. Ryan couldn't hold back his laugh anymore. Let me get this straight. You think I should let random strangers into my backyard to swim in my pool that I paid for, just because you say so? That's what being a good neighbor is all about, Karen replied smugly. Now, I expect to see the gates unlocked by this weekend, or we'll have no choice but to take further action. Ryan's amusement faded. Oh yeah? And what exactly does further action mean? Karen's voice took on a sharper edge. Let's just say you don't want to find out. With that, she hung up. Ryan sat there, phone still in his hand, utterly dumbfounded. Was she threatening him over a pool? By the end of the week, things got even worse. The first sign of trouble came in the form of trespassers. Ryan had installed a security camera system, and when he checked the footage on his phone one morning, he saw something that made his blood boil. 2 HOA members had climbed his fence. Not kids, not random teens, grown adults. One of them, a balding man in a tucked-in polo, even had a clipboard with him, as if he were conducting some kind of inspection. The footage showed them snooping around the pool area, measuring the deck, and even taking photos of the water. When one of them tried to jiggle the back door handle, Ryan immediately grabbed his phone and called the cops. By the time police arrived, the trespassers were gone, but Ryan had solid evidence. He filed a police report for unlawful entry and sent the footage directly to his lawyer. If Karen thought she could intimidate him, she had another thing coming. Later that afternoon, just as he was installing a higher, reinforced gate, a group of angry-looking neighbors approached. You know, this is really selfish of you, one woman snapped. We're just trying to make this a better place to live. Ryan wiped the sweat from his brow and turned to face them. By breaking into my yard, he shot back. The man standing next to her crossed his arms. We're just trying to check the safety regulations. What if someone gets hurt because you didn't follow proper pool guidelines? Ryan laughed. What part of private property do you people not understand? The woman huffed, shaking her head. We've lived here for over 10 years. This neighborhood used to be about community. Now people like you come in, put up fences, and act like you're too good for everyone else. Ryan's patience was gone. I work my ass off to have a place where I can enjoy peace and quiet. I didn't pay for a pool so a bunch of random people could treat it like a public rec center. If you want one so badly, why don't you petition the HOA to build one instead of stealing mine? That's not the point, the man snapped. It's about neighborhood spirit. Ryan smirked. Yeah, well, my spirit says get off my property. The crowd eventually dispersed, grumbling under their breath, but Ryan could feel it. They weren't going to let this go. And he was right. That weekend, Ryan was woken up by sirens. He shot out of bed, heart pounding, and rushed to the window. 2 police cars were parked outside his house. Confused and still half asleep, Ryan threw on a shirt and hurried outside, only to find Karen standing triumphantly on his driveway, arms crossed, smiling. An officer approached. Sir, we got a call about a domestic disturbance and an unauthorized structure violating community regulations. Ryan blinked. What? Karen piped up, her voice dripping with fake concern. Yes, officer. We've been trying to talk to Mr. Thompson about his refusal to cooperate with the HOA. He's been aggressive toward community members, and we're worried about his erratic behavior. Also, his pool does not meet safety standards and may need to be demolished. Ryan felt his blood boil. This is harassment. The officer sighed, looking from Karen to Ryan. Sir, do you mind if we take a look? Ryan stood his ground. Unless you have a warrant or probable cause, you're not stepping foot on my property. The officer nodded. That's fair. He turned to Karen. Ma'am, unless you have actual legal authority over this property, there's nothing we can do. Karen's smug expression faltered. But he's breaking community rules. He's not in your HOA, ma'am. The officer deadpanned. For the first time, Karen looked uncertain. She opened her mouth, closed it, then turned bright red. The officers left, and Karen stormed off, her entire plan backfiring spectacularly. Ryan watched her retreat, shaking his head. She was getting desperate, and when people like Karen get desperate, they get reckless. Ryan had always considered himself a patient man, but at this point, Karen and her power-hungry antics had tested every ounce of his restraint. The police may have dismissed her ridiculous complaints, but she wasn't done. not by a long shot. If anything, being humiliated in front of law enforcement had only made her more determined to win. The next morning, Ryan stepped outside to retrieve his mail and froze mid-step. His gate, the one he had just reinforced after the last trespassing incident, was now covered in HOA-branded chains and padlocks. A fresh sign had been nailed onto the wood frame. Community pool access restricted. Pool hours, 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. weekends only. Contact HOA for reservations. Ryan let out a bitter laugh. It wasn't enough for Karen to try and intimidate him. Now she had literally locked him out of his own backyard. He pulled out his phone, snapping photos of the illegal modifications before dialing the number he had now memorized by heart. Karen picked up on the second ring, her voice filled with forced politeness. "Hello, this is Karen Davis with the Springdale HOA office. How can I assist you today?" Ryan didn't bother hiding his annoyance. "Karen, you put padlocks on my gate." "Oh, those," she chirped, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. "Yes. Well, since you refused to comply, we had to secure the property for the safety of the neighborhood. We can't have people sneaking in and using the pool unsupervised. It's just a liability issue, you understand." Ryan took a slow breath, rubbing his temples. "Karen, let me make this simple. You locked me out of my own yard. That's illegal." A dramatic sigh came from the other end of the line. "Ryan, you have to stop being so difficult. The community is bigger than just one person. We need to think about the children." Ryan couldn't help it. He barked out a laugh. "Oh, screw off, Karen. You don't care about the children. You care about control. And right now, you're about 5 minutes away from me cutting these locks and reporting you for trespassing." There was a pause on the other end, followed by a barely contained huff. "Well, if you're going to be hostile, then I guess we'll have to escalate things further." And with that, she hung up. Ryan's hands clenched around the phone. Escalate further? Was she serious? What was she going to do next? File an eviction notice for a house she didn't own? He didn't waste time. Marching back to the garage, he grabbed a pair of bolt cutters, stalked back to the gate, and snipped through the padlocks like they were made of butter. The locks clattered to the ground, and Ryan swung the gate open, shaking his head. This was getting ridiculous. But as soon as he walked into his backyard, he realized it wasn't just the gate that Karen had messed with. His pool furniture was missing. His grill had been moved. Even his deck chairs were gone. And then he spotted it. A brand new sign issued by the HOA, drilled into his fence. Pool regulations. All residents must sign in with the HOA. No outside food or drink allowed. Lifeguard on duty coming soon. Ryan gritted his teeth. Not only had she locked him out, but she had actually entered his yard and tried to turn it into an official HOA facility. That was it. Time to go nuclear. That night, Ryan took action. First, he installed a new security system, motion-activated sprinklers, floodlights, and high-definition cameras. He wasn't about to let anyone snoop around again. Second, he printed every single legal document proving his home was outside the HOA's jurisdiction and emailed them to his lawyer. And third, he started preparing a special surprise for Karen. The next morning, the real war began. Ryan didn't have to wait long. Around 10 a.m., Karen returned, this time with 2 HOA board members in tow. Ryan was ready. He stepped onto the deck, arms crossed, as Karen pointed dramatically at the gate. "There, he's destroying HOA property," she announced, looking smug. One of the board members, an older man with glasses and a nervous expression, frowned. Karen, didn't you say his house wasn't part of the HOA?" Karen's smile faltered slightly. "It's adjacent, which means it falls under our jurisdiction." Ryan smirked, holding up a printed copy of his deed. "Actually, no, it doesn't. And since you seem to have a hard time understanding legal boundaries, let me make this very clear." He turned to the board members. "This woman has been harassing me for weeks. She's falsely claimed ownership of my property, illegally entered my yard, stolen my furniture, and now she's trying to force fines on a home that's not even in her HOA." Karen turned red. "That's not." Ryan cut her off. "And it gets better. Last night, I installed new security cameras." Karen froze. Ryan pulled out his phone, tapping the screen. "Guess what they caught? Footage of you trespassing in my yard, moving my stuff, trying to make it look like a community pool." The nervous board member paled. "Wait, you actually went into his yard?" Karen stammered. I was just making sure everything was up to safety standards." Ryan grinned. "Oh, I'm sure the police will love that excuse." Karen blanched. And then, as if on cue, the HOA's own lawyer arrived, a tall, no-nonsense woman in a sharp business suit. She stepped out of her car and walked straight to Ryan, completely ignoring Karen. "Mr. Thompson?" she asked, holding out a folder. "We received your legal complaint. After reviewing the case, I can confirm that your home is not within HOA jurisdiction. Furthermore, Ms. Davis's actions do not reflect the HOA's official stance, and we will be handling this matter internally." Karen's mouth dropped open. "What? You? You work for the HOA? You work for me?" The lawyer glared at her. "I work for the association, Karen, not you." Ryan could barely hold back his laughter. The tables had officially turned. Karen sputtered, turning to the board members. You can't do this." The older man shook his head. "You lied to us, Karen. And now we're on the hook for legal damages. This is exactly why we had to settle the last lawsuit you caused." Karen went silent. Ryan tilted his head. "Last lawsuit?" The lawyer sighed. "Let's just say this isn't her first time overstepping her authority." Ryan's smirk widened. "Well, I'd love to hear more, but I have a police report to file." Karen turned pale. "Ryan, please," she whispered. "Can't we just talk?" Ryan leaned forward. "No, Karen, we can't." And with that, he walked away, leaving her to deal with the fallout. The war wasn't over yet, but Karen had just lost her biggest battle. Ryan had expected some level of fallout after exposing Karen's antics to the HOA board and their lawyer, but what followed was nothing short of a neighborhood civil war. The community, which had previously been passive and mostly uninvolved, was now split into two distinct factions. Team Ryan, made up of homeowners who were sick of Karen's power-hungry rule, and Team HOA, consisting of diehard rule followers who clung to Karen's vision of absolute control. The first sign of the shift in power came from Mr. Peterson, an elderly man who had lived in the neighborhood for over 20 years. He knocked on Ryan's door the day after the incident with the HOA lawyer, holding a folder filled with documents dating back over a decade. "You did the right thing, son," he said as Ryan let him in. "Karen's been running this place like her own personal kingdom for years. You're the first person who's had the guts to stand up to her." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "I find that hard to believe. No one's ever pushed back before." "Oh, plenty have," Mr. Peterson chuckled. "They either moved away or got bullied into silence." He handed Ryan the folder. Inside were old HOA meeting notes, emails, and even formal complaints. "She's been sued before," Mr. Peterson explained. "Twice. First time, she tried to fine a guy for painting his house the wrong shade of blue, even though the HOA handbook didn't have a single rule about colors. He fought in court and won. The second time, she tried to get a single mom evicted for excessive noise complaints. Turned out it was just her kid playing in the backyard. That case was settled quietly, but she made sure to blacklist anyone who sided against her." Ryan flipped through the documents. "And no one thought to just vote her out?" Mr. Peterson sighed. "She's rigged every election with proxy votes from absentee homeowners. Everyone knows it, but no one's been able to prove it." Ryan grinned. "Then it's about time we did." By the next weekend, word had spread about Ryan's confrontation with Karen, and more neighbors started approaching him. Some of them had horror stories of their own. Fines for things as petty as having the wrong type of flowers in their front yard or being forced to repaint their mailbox because it wasn't approved by the HOA. Then there were the neutral parties, people who just wanted to be left alone and were wary of getting involved. But even they agreed that Karen had gone too far with the pool stunt. And then, of course, there were Karen's loyalists. One of them was Deborah, a woman in her 50s who had somehow convinced herself that Karen was a saint. She showed up at Ryan's house in full HOA-branded gear, complete with a matching tote bag. "You need to apologize to Karen," she snapped the moment Ryan opened the door. Ryan blinked. "Come again." Deborah huffed, crossing her arms. "You embarrassed her in front of the entire board. She's been working tirelessly to make this community a better place. And this is how you repay her." Ryan couldn't help but laugh. "By trespassing on my property and trying to steal my pool?" Deborah's nostrils flared. "You're selfish. We all try to work together to make this neighborhood beautiful, and all you've done is cause division." Ryan leaned against the doorframe. "Tell me something, Deborah. When Karen fined you last year for having wind chimes that were too loud, did you enjoy working together then?" Deborah's face turned red, but she refused to back down. "That's different. Rules are rules." Ryan smirked. "Right. Rules for everyone but Karen." She stomped away, muttering something about ungrateful troublemakers, but Ryan didn't care. The cracks were showing. Over the next few days, the community war escalated. One night, Ryan caught someone trying to steal his new private property sign from the fence. The next morning, He found anonymous HOA complaint letters taped to his door, claiming his house was out of compliance with community standards. But Ryan wasn't alone anymore. More neighbors started pushing back. A retired couple, George and Lisa, came over to personally thank him for standing up to Karen. "She fined us $500 last year for improper lawn edging," Lisa said, shaking her head. "Told us we had to use a specific brand of mulch or face more penalties." George snorted. "Imagine paying HOA dues just to get bullied in your own front yard." Ryan chuckled. "Sounds like we should all be planning a recall election, George." Ryan knew the battle with Karen was reaching its breaking point. With more neighbors turning against her, the once untouchable HOA queen was starting to crack. But he also knew Karen wouldn't go down without a fight. If he wanted to put an end to her reign of terror, he needed a plan, one that left no room for her to wriggle out of the consequences. The first step, exposing her corruption publicly. Ryan gathered all the evidence: the trespassing footage, the illegal fines, and the fake HOA notices she had placed on his house. But the real golden ticket came from Mr. Peterson's documents, which detailed years of HOA fraud. That's when Ryan learned the biggest bombshell of them all. Karen had been embezzling HOA funds. Not only had she been illegally fining residents, but she had also diverted community money into her own personal account under the guise of administrative fees. It was the smoking gun he needed. The second step, using Karen's own arrogance against her. Ryan put together a formal complaint with the help of George and Lisa, the retired couple who had suffered years under Karen's rule. They reached out to more homeowners, collecting signatures for a recall vote, a special election to remove Karen from her position as HOA president. The third step, the final confrontation. Ryan knew Karen would try every dirty trick in the book to stop him, so he decided to call her bluff in the most public way possible. The next HOA board meeting was held in the local community center, and Ryan made sure to attend, along with half the neighborhood. Karen sat at the front of the room, flanked by her remaining loyalists, still holding on to her delusions of control. But she hadn't expected the sheer number of people who showed up against her. As soon as the meeting began, Ryan stood up, holding up a folder of documents. "Karen, before we get started, I have a few questions for you." Karen pursed her lips. "This is not a Q&A session, Ryan. If you have concerns, you can file them properly." Ryan cut her off. "Oh, I already did. With the HOA lawyer, the county fraud department, and the police." Karen's face lost color. Murmurs spread across the room. Ryan held up the evidence folder. "See, Karen has been lying to all of us. She's been fining homeowners illegally, forging HOA regulations, and worst of all," he paused for dramatic effect, "she's been stealing our money." The room exploded into gasps. One of Karen's board members leaned forward, frowning. "What proof do you have?" Ryan handed a stack of financial records to the HOA treasurer. "Check the transactions yourself. Over the past 5 years, Karen has been funneling thousands of dollars into her personal accounts. She called them administrative fees, but there's no record of where that money went." The treasurer flipped through the pages, his expression darkening. He looked up at Karen. "Karen, is this true?" Karen slammed her clipboard onto the table. "This is ridiculous. This is a smear campaign by a selfish homeowner who refuses to follow the rules." Ryan grinned. "I'm not even in your HOA, Karen." That was the final blow. The entire room erupted. Homeowners stood up, demanding answers. Some people called her a thief, while others demanded refunds for the fines she had given them over the years. Karen's loyalists looked around, realizing they were outnumbered. Even her closest allies started distancing themselves. Then the HOA lawyer stood up. "This is enough," she said firmly. Effective immediately, Karen Davis is removed from her position as HOA president. A cheer erupted from the crowd. But it got even better. 2 uniformed officers entered the room, walking straight toward Karen. "Ms. Davis," one of them said, "we need you to come with us." Karen's face turned beet red. "You can't do this," she shrieked. "I am the HOA. This is a setup. I demand to speak to a lawyer." The officer nodded. "That's exactly what you'll be doing." At the station. And just like that, Karen was arrested. The aftermath was sweet karma. After Karen's disgraceful exit, the HOA board held a formal re-election. Without Karen manipulating the votes, the homeowners elected a new president, one who actually cared about fairness. As for Ryan, he finally got to enjoy his pool in peace. Karen was facing multiple charges, including trespassing, fraud, and embezzlement. She ended up losing her house to cover legal fees, and rumor had it she tried to move into another HOA-run neighborhood. Unfortunately for her, Ryan's story had gone viral, and by the time she applied to another community, she was blacklisted. The final cherry on top? Ryan installed a brand new sign on his gate: private property. Karen not welcome. And for the first time in months, Ryan finally kicked back, relaxed, and enjoyed the quiet life he had fought so hard to protect. With Karen finally out of the picture, Ryan felt something he hadn't felt in months: peace. No more ridiculous notices taped to his door. No more strangers trying to invade his yard. And best of all, no Karen. She was gone, and with her, the toxic grip she had on the neighborhood. But the aftermath of her downfall was just as entertaining as the battle itself. The HOA board, now under new leadership, had a long list of problems to clean up. Thanks to Ryan's evidence dump, Karen's financial fraud had officially put the HOA under investigation by the county. The board was scrambling to refund homeowners who had been wrongfully fined, and people who had been living in fear of her arbitrary rules were now demanding reform. Mr. Peterson, the elderly neighbor who had been one of the first to stand by Ryan, was elected as the new HOA president. Unlike Karen, he actually cared about fairness and wanted to reduce the HOA's overreach. "The first thing we're doing," Mr. Peterson announced at a community gathering, "is rolling back every stupid rule Karen put in place. No more fines for lawn gnomes, no more paint color restrictions, and if anyone wants a pool in their yard, they can have a damn pool." The crowd cheered. But Ryan, he was more interested in what was happening to Karen. After her humiliating arrest, Karen had tried everything to claw her way back into power. She had hired a lawyer, claiming that Ryan had set her up and that the HOA board was conspiring against her. It didn't work. With solid evidence against her, Karen was facing criminal charges for fraud, trespassing, and embezzlement. The county was also investigating her for tax evasion, since she had never reported the thousands of dollars she had been siphoning from HOA funds. She was completely and utterly ruined. And that's when the foreclosure notices hit. It turned out Karen hadn't actually paid her own HOA dues in over a year. While she had been fining other people for minor infractions, she had been neglecting her own property fees. With her legal costs piling up, she had no way to pay back the HOA, and soon her house went into foreclosure. When Ryan heard the news, he couldn't stop laughing. Karen, the woman who had tried to steal his pool, control his property, and harass him into submission, was now losing her own home. It was perfect karma. Ryan had thought the entertainment was over, but then came the moving trucks. One afternoon, as he was enjoying a peaceful swim, he noticed a familiar figure standing across the street. It was Karen, watching bitterly as a crew of workers carried her belongings out of her house. Her once pristine lawn was now covered in boxes, furniture, and trash bags. The official foreclosure notice was taped to the front door, bold and unforgiving: foreclosed property. All items must be removed by 5 p.m. Trespassing will result in legal action. Ryan stood at his fence, towel over his shoulder, sipping a cold drink as he watched the show. Karen noticed him, her face twisted with rage and embarrassment. "You," she hissed, storming toward the fence. "This is your fault." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "My fault? Pretty sure you did this to yourself." Karen's eyes burned with hatred. "You think you've won, don't you?" she snapped. "You're just as bad as everyone else, hoarding what should have been for the community. You're selfish, greedy." Ryan held up a finger. Careful, Karen. Wouldn't want to get arrested for harassment on the way out." Karen gritted her teeth, fists clenched at her sides, but she knew there was nothing she could do. With one last glare, she turned on her heel and stomped off, leaving Ryan to enjoy the sight of her downfall. With Karen gone, the neighborhood felt different, lighter, happier. People started talking to each other more. Instead of glaring over HOA disputes, they started helping each other out, trading tools, sharing landscaping advice, and even organizing a neighborhood barbecue. And the best part? At the barbecue, Ryan was the guest of honor. To Ryan, Mr. Peterson announced, raising his glass, "The man who took down the HOA tyrant and gave this neighborhood its freedom back." A cheer erupted, and Ryan, though never one for the spotlight, couldn't help but smile. As the sun set, he leaned back in his chair, watching his neighbors laugh, kids play, and for the first time in years, the community actually felt like a real neighborhood, not a dictatorship. Karen was gone, the HOA was fixed, and his pool was 100% private. Life was finally good. And for the first time since he had moved in, Ryan felt like he was exactly where he belonged. Just when Ryan thought the saga was officially over, he received an anonymous tip. Karen had tried to move into another HOA-controlled neighborhood, but thanks to the viral nature of Ryan's story, which had spread like wildfire through online homeowner forums, Karen's infamy preceded her. The HOA in her new potential neighborhood denied her application. Not just once. Every HOA she applied to rejected her. Karen Davis, the once feared HOA tyrant, was now HOA homeless. When Ryan read the news, he burst out laughing. It was the ultimate poetic justice. And with that, he finally, truly put the whole ridiculous ordeal behind him.